All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here, for being with us by Zoom. We are so fortunate to continue with our series of creative nonfiction in conversation. Thanks to our wonderful artist in residence this year, Saeed Jones. Today we're very fortunate to have with us Ashley Ford. Ashley's the author of the New York Times best-selling memoir, Somebody's Daughter, published by Flatiron Books and an Oprah book. Wow. She's the former co-host of the HBO companion podcast, Lovecraft Country Radio, and the current host of Ben & Jerry's Into the Mix. Ashley has written or guest edited for the New York Times, The Guardian, Elle Magazine, BuzzFeed, Out, Slate, Teen Vogue, New York Magazine, and numerous other web and print publications. In addition to writing and hosting podcasts, she also has developed special projects for companies like Medium.com, MailChimp Presents, PRX Publications, Audible, and MasterCard. Ashley has taught creative nonfiction at the New School in Manhattan, Aspen Summer Worlds, and served as Ball State University's writer in residence. We are very fortunate to be able to also say now that Ashley's a mentor in our program. Mentoring Alicia, who's right here. We'll have to make sure to get some pictures later. So thank you so much for bringing your talents to our program, both as a mentor and now in conversation with Saeed. I also don't want to miss, she lives in Indianapolis with her husband, poet and fiction writer Kelly Stacy, and their chocolate lab, Astro Renegade Ford Stacy. Great name. Now, I know that to all of us, Saeed's well known, but for anybody who of the uninitiated, Saeed is our second artist in residence here. He is at work on 4 different books, but his next book, Home Out There, is a memoir forthcoming from Washington Square Press, in addition to a book of poetry and a book about masculinity. But today is very special because Saeed and his friend and collaborator, the poet Maggie Smith, curated a collection of work that was just announced, the People's Project, which is a collection of essays, poems, visual arts, to give a map, vision, blueprint for the future. And also very fortunate to be able to say Ashley's one of the contributors to that. So this is a very special day. Thank you so much. And thank you. And it's an honor to be part of that. But thank you so much, Saeed, for curating that. It's such an important moment. Saeed, in addition to the work in progress, of course, is an author of the memoir, How We Fight for Our Lives, which was the winner of the 2019 Kirkus Prize for Nonfiction, and the poetry collection Prelude to Bruise. Poetry and essays appeared in The New Yorker, New York Times, Oxford, GQ, and as many of you enjoy as I do, and I totally forgot my hat, host of the podcast Vibe Check, which I know is a favorite. So I will now turn it over for this conversation. Thank you both so much.
Thank you, Jason, for making the space and always being so supportive. You're really someone who I know you have my back and the backs of people I care about. Hey, boo. Thank you, everyone on Zoom and in person, for joining us for another installment of Creative Nonfiction in Conversation. Y'all know how it goes. We're both going to read a little bit of work, and then we're going to talk about both the work. You said earlier, can we talk about money? Sure. I would love that. And then, also any questions y'all have, also questions from Zoom, right? And we'll get into it. But like, this is my boo right here. If you want to get to her, you got to go the fuck through me. I do not play. I adore Ashley so much. She is a part of my heart out in the world, and it means a lot that she can be here and is mentoring Alicia as well. So that is I'm driving her crazy because I'm like an asshole. But then I'll say something really nice just to like fuck her up. Just, like, keep her going.
He's messing with me.
I do love my boo.
He's really messing with my mind. All of that is mutual, except for the fact that you might be able to get through me to get to Saeed, except I'm coming back around. I'm more of a karmic experience. So
And you're going to read first. I'm so excited.
I'm going to read first. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about what I'm reading. First of all, thank you all for having me. Jason, thank you. Saeed, thank you. Christina, Allison, you all have been fantastic. Thank you so much for all of your help and all of your encouragement and for making this experience, first time on your campus, thank you for making it incredibly, incredibly welcoming. I really appreciate that. So if you don't know, I wrote this book, Somebody's Daughter. It is a memoir dealing with my childhood. My father was incarcerated when I was around 6 months old, and he did not get out of prison until I was 2 weeks away from 30. And the book sort of is about the space in between those times. And it begins with me finding out that my dad is going to be released from prison, which at that point I think of as a pipe dream. I thought he was never going to be released. I didn't even know how long his sentence was. So that's how the book begins. Sorry, of course, my husband has the worst timing in the world. I knew he was going to do this to me. I even have it on Do Not Disturb, which means he called twice. But anyway, I do love him or whatever, but get it together, Kelly Stacy. I'm starting this from, one of the things that we've talked about a little bit, Saeed and I, and even in the conversation earlier, is about knowing what you want and taking experiences seriously. And I wanted to read this section of the story because one of the things that I'm fascinated with that I end up writing about, ruminating on a lot, is the helplessness of childhood. The fact that when you're a child, your life is really at the whim of the adults around you. And I don't know what it's like for anybody else, but for me, I think one of my first heartbreaks, the most heartbreaking thing in the world, is looking at an adult who has authority over you and realizing that they either don't care about you, don't like you, or aren't going to help you. And realizing you can't do anything about that, because that is how the power dynamic works. So yeah. I'm going to start. My bad. Okay. Only not. Should hear it. Yeah, let's go here. Also, I should say that the book is written quite often from my perspective. And when I'm writing from like a child's perspective, it's like pretty simple and straightforward because in my experience, that's what children are like, or at least what I was like. I liked my first grade teacher, Mrs. York, and she seemed to like me well enough, even though I struggled to keep quiet when I was supposed to. I had a lot of questions and even more follow-up questions. Still, I sensed she was more amused by me than annoyed, and so I was not afraid of her. It helped that in general, her decisions made sense. I appreciated the clarity of rules and routine found in her classroom. When she corrected me, she did so with obvious care, and that counted for a lot with me. Kids can always tell the difference between adults who want to empower them and adults who want to overpower them. She was the former. There hadn't been any clue Mrs. York was unhappy with me. At least I hadn't noticed one in enough time. Sometime between the moment I left the school and the moment I arrived at my mother's front door, Mrs. York had called her. I didn't know this when I opened the door, and my mother's fists came down on my shoulders, knocking the loose straps of my backpack to the floor. I panicked. I ran into the sitting room next to the kitchen, grabbed a cushion from the wooden couch, and attempted to shield myself from the current incoming attack. What did I do? My mind scanned for something, anything I might have done and forgotten about. Did I hide something? Take something? Break something? I was coming up blank, but it was hard to hang on to a thought while my mother thrashed above me. She stopped hitting me long enough to yell at me that my teacher had called. Apparently, Mrs. York told my mother I'd been caught saying an inappropriately sexual thing to another student. You said something about a man having his hands down somebody's pants. Where did you see that? Where did you hear that from? My head continued to spin, confused, trying to remember saying something like that to anybody. No, I didn't, I said, realizing I was telling the truth. I didn't say that. Mrs. York is lying. Of course, she must have been lying, but I couldn't understand why. My mother sneered at me. That woman doesn't have any reason to lie about you. You did it. I know you did it. But I hadn't. All through me, I knew it was true that I hadn't said those words to anybody. My mother told me I had to call my best friend, the other student she'd been told I was speaking to, and apologize for my behavior. Don't you ever let me find out you've been saying sick shit to people at school. If you get kicked out, you can stay there. I climbed the stairs to my mother's, oh wait, sorry, said that wrong? If you get kicked out, you can't stay here. I climbed the stairs to my mother's bedroom and used her phone to call my friend. What did you say to me? She asked. Why are you in trouble? I knew my mother was listening on the second phone downstairs and I wasn't sure how much I could say. So I just repeated myself, still sobbing. I'm sorry for the thing I said to you at school today. I won't ever do it again. I could tell she was still confused when she told me it was okay, that she didn't even remember what I'd apparently said. I heard the click as my mother hung up. I told my friend I'd see her tomorrow, hung up my end as well. I walked to my bedroom, sat on the bed, and watched the door. She'll come in, I thought. She'll come in and she'll tell me she's sorry. I slept in my own room that night alone, but I woke up on fire. The next day, I straightened my back as I walked into the school, down the hall, and into my classroom. I put my things away along with the rest of my classmates. My best friend tried to catch my eye, but I avoided her. I had not done what I was accused of, but all the same, I felt ashamed of the accusation. I could hear my mother's voice drawing out the word sick to describe me and what she'd been told I'd done. That word in that tone landed on and stuck to me. I was certain all you had to do was look at me to see it. So I didn't want someone I cared about to look at me. I wasn't sure I cared about Mrs. York anymore. She'd lied about me. After finishing my morning practice sheet, busy work I hated, I calmly walked back to Mrs. York's desk. I stood in front of her until she looked up from the paper she was writing on. She looked surprised to find me there, and I was angry about that. She'd called my home and lied about me. My mother had gotten so angry she hadn't spoken to me for the rest of the evening. This woman had no idea the havoc she'd let loose in my home or what it had cost me, or I thought, she just doesn't care. I felt my anger rise with my breath. She should have expected me. Can I help you, Ashley Ford? I looked into her eyes and asked, why did you tell my mother I said a bad thing when I didn't? The curious smile dropped from her face, replaced by a confused one. She started to speak, to explain, I think, then stopped herself. She called another student over, a girl smaller than me, who I didn't really know yet. I'd met my best friend, Jamie, on the second day of school and hadn't really branched out since then. One good friend was enough for me. Others would come eventually, but as long as I had one, I felt a satisfactory sense of companionship. This girl was not my friend. Mrs. York crouched in front of her. Honey, didn't you tell me you heard Ashley Ford say something yesterday? The girl looked at her, then looked at me, back to her, again to me. Then she shrugged and said as if we were both wasting her time. Well, it did sound like Ashley Ford. This time, Mrs. York's smile faded altogether. You didn't actually see her say it? The girl rolled her eyes. It did sound like her, though. Okay, Mrs. York raised one hand to stop the girl from speaking and put the other over her own face. Oh dear. She looked at me and understood something unintended had occurred here. And to her credit, she tried to fix it. Ashley, I'm so sorry. I believed her apology and was certain she'd been misled, but I knew that wasn't enough. You have to call my mom, I said. Please, you have to call her and tell her I didn't say it. She promised me she would. I reminded her again before the end of the day. You have to tell her it wasn't me, I repeated. On the bus ride home, I fantasized of arriving to an open door. My mother waiting in the frame, waiting to scoop me up into hugs and kisses and apologies. She would tell me how sorry she was, that she should have believed me, that she knew I was good, and she would promise never to hit me again. My mind wouldn't let me imagine much further than that, but that part seemed key, appropriate even, given the severity of response the night before. She would want to make it up to me, make it right. That's what you did for somebody you loved, right? At least that's what you did in the movies. The door was closed when I walked up to it, but that wasn't the most important part of my fantasy scenario anyway. I opened the door and walked into the kitchen. My mother was cooking something on the stovetop. I tried to read her body language before approaching, but she couldn't detect any specific note of danger. She looked at me over her shoulder, still using her hands to stir whatever was in the pot. You got homework? I pulled off my backpack without taking my eyes off her. Just reading, I said. We both knew that meant I'd already finished. Did my teacher call you? She stopped stirring the pot. Yes, she did. She started stirring again. I took a step closer to her back, unsure if she had heard me or if we were talking about the same call. Did she tell you that I didn't say that thing? Did she tell you that girl lied on me? My mother stopped stirring the pot again and cut off the burner. She turned to face me. Her face was stony and set. We made eye contact and it scared me, but I didn't feel I was allowed to look away. Yes, Ashley, she told me. Now, why are you still in my face? She knew what I wanted, and she wanted me to know it would not be mine. We were locked in a power struggle, not that I would have known to call it that, and I was confused because I did not want power from my mother. I wanted her to acknowledge the pain in my body and heart. I wanted it to mean something to her because she loved me, and I knew it, and I couldn't understand why she couldn't just say sorry. What was so wrong with me that I didn't deserve that? That night, I dreamed I flew across a black night, like the children in Tar Beach, to the farm in Missouri, and that when I landed, I saw I'd been cut in two parts and somehow left one half of myself behind in Indiana. I didn't want to go back for it.
Let's see. The temperature in the room changed. I felt everyone's bodies bracing. And I knew what was going to happen. Still shook. Okay. Well, obviously, you've set up so much that I want to talk about. I'm going to read an excerpt of a longer essay, but just for time. I'm working on a lot of books, as Jason mentioned. It just feels like, Morrison says, this is the time when artists get to work. And there's just so little I can control. And it really upsets me, but I can control this. I can make spaces and moments like this. And I know it's important for you as it is for me. So one of the books is called Home Out There. It is about Black queer people, myself included, Ashley included, leaving home in order to arrive at home. And so there are all kinds of different sections. The book's kind of written like a mosaic. But this is a vignette when I'm out in the world. And an interesting thing about me is that as much as I try to be tough, I'm not actually very tough. And I always have great conversations with Uber drivers and Lyft drivers. The whole book could just be about my conversations with drivers, and this is one of them. Mr. Anthony, New Orleans, December 26, 2023. You an author? My Lyft driver asks as I buckle my seatbelt. Yes, I answer, looking up, confused. Following his eyes in the rearview mirror, I realize he's looking at the sign of the bookstore where he's picked me up, Baldwin & Co. Oh, yes, got some good reading done today, I add. He nods and pulls us away from the curb. That used to be a daiquiri store, he explains. He's happy to see a bookstore in this neighborhood. I mentioned that they make a point of stocking books by Black writers. He nods again. I know from the app that his name is Anthony, but I put a Mr. in front of it in my mind. Mr. Anthony could be my grandfather, if my grandfather, a retired Memphis city bus driver, was still alive, still driving strangers from one stop to another. If my mother was alive, she'd say, well, maybe part of him is your grandpa. It's funny how some people, strangers especially, can cast your mind homeward just by their posture or the color of their voice. At the stoplight, he scans two people crossing an empty lot and sucks his teeth, but doesn't say why they've earned his attention. I'm sitting in the back of Mr. Anthony's car, but it feels like I'm sitting next to him on the porch, playing spades. Trying to see what he sees in all that passes by. America is a trip. That's something else Mom would say. Anything that wasn't behaving as it should be was a trip to her. I guess she meant crazy as in acid trip. But when I think about her turn of phrase now, I hear her saying, everything takes you and your mind somewhere you don't realize you need to be. Maybe I'm just tripping though. But this is where my mind goes in between destinations. And anyway, America is a trip. People old enough to be retired are still taking gigs. Mr. Anthony should be on a porch somewhere in New Orleans, playing spades or dominoes with his friends, sipping a taste from a red Solo cup if he likes. I don't need to know this man to know he deserves to be at ease. Fewer and fewer of our elders are sitting on porches. Have you noticed? They've got bills to pay. Where are you from? Mr. Anthony asked, pulling my mind back into the vehicle. Ohio, Columbus. They must really hate y'all up there. He laughs, patting the wheel. Why? Who? I laugh too, though I don't get the joke. Shit, it really does feel like we're playing spades, and I am terrible at cards. Black people from Ohio are always down here. Every chance y'all get. He actually lets out a hoot at this time. Mr. Anthony is cracking himself up. My laughter brightens now that I'm inside the joke with him. You see, I've learned that drivers understand the comings and goings of cities in ways that passengers can't fathom. A news editor told me once that if you want to understand a war, interview the grave diggers. I'd argue that if you want to understand a city, interview the drivers. I tell Mr. Anthony he's clocked me like a second hand, and we both smile. Feeling easier with him now, I tell Mr. Anthony that for over a decade, I've been coming to New Orleans a couple of times a year. I was here in September to see Beyonce's Renaissance tour, and I'll be here again in February for Mardi Gras. I visited for the first time in 2011 and just kept coming back. He nods. Ohio, Chicago, New York too. Y'all are always down here. I understand though. New Orleans is New Orleans. Nothing like it, nowhere else. Born and raised, I asked. No, from Mississippi, he says. Then bites down on a sound. I got out of there when I was young. I tell people I'm from Mississippi. Those white people there. Mr. Anthony's mind runs home, then races back. His hands tighten on the wheel. I think about my trips across the state line into Mississippi from Memphis when I was a little boy. I think about my stops in Oxford and Jackson on book tours, how time had me by the throat when I was there. I think about my friend Kiese's memoir about growing up in Mississippi. Heavy. KSA would say. Yeah, that's the word. I share all this with Mr. Anthony. I don't know exactly where I've steered our conversation, but I want him to know that I'm just as shook by that place as he is. Mississippi is different, I say, and actually let out a sigh. At the stoplight, he locks his eyes on mine in the rearview mirror. Those motherfuckers, let me tell you something. I'm terminal. I've got 3 sisters. 2 of them still live in Mississippi. Found out I was terminal and told them, and they just started crying and all that. I said, I'm terminal. I'm not dead yet. I figure I'll make it to Christmas. Christmas was yesterday, I think. He's got 1 year to live, and he's still taking gigs. I told my sisters, I'll make it up there at least one more time to hug them, just for them, since they were crying and all that, but I ain't staying. But I ain't staying. Those white motherfuckers up there, yeah, they different. Still trying to call me boy. Me at my age. Motherfuckers, last time I was up there was to bury our brother. Shit. By the time they were leaving the church, I was already gone. My sisters were calling me, where you at? Where you go? Shit. I was already on the highway. Halfway back to New Orleans. Mr. Anthony is laughing again now, still mad as hell, but laughing, even as he smacks the backside of the wheel. It's a switchblade kind of laugh. Like his sisters, I'm still hung up on his terminal diagnosis. Questions gnawed up my throat. How are you feeling now? Did you have a good Christmas? I want to tell Mr. Anthony that America is a trip. I want to tell him that even though I know where we are, I can't remember how we got here. Or maybe I want to tell him I know exactly how we got here. And that's why it's easier to forget sometimes, or often, why it's easier to just be one of history's passengers, to look out the window and pretend I don't see the direction I'm traveling. I'll end it there. Thank you. Wow. Heavy. Heavy.
Oh my gosh.
There's so much I want to talk to you about. I mean, one thing I'll just start selfishly. One of my mentee, Nick, I've been bullying him into writing an essay about childhood memory, and trying to force him to stay in that voice, because I think, as we saw with you, it unlocks something. Children look at the world differently for so many reasons. So can I just, to start there, can you say something, obviously this is a formative memory, a heartbreaking, heart-shattering formative memory. You acknowledge like the adult wisdom, we have that too. Like, I love you, like the way you're like, I don't know this yet, but this is a power struggle. And, all these, she knows and she's denying. But also you really embrace your perspective as a child. And I wondered if you could just kind of talk about that, like why you made that choice and what it allowed you to do.
Yeah, I think I made that choice because, I always, I know that like technically I'm a millennial, right? I'm in the millennial generation, but I always like to refer to my I guess cohort in my generation as like the Hook generation. And I call them the Hook generation because of the movie Hook specifically, which sounds like you're like plenty of people saw. What do you mean? But let me tell you why. Hook was indicative of a very specific kind of film and television trope that was really popular when I was a child. And that trope was essentially, if you forget what it's like to be a child, you will become the villain of adults. If you can't remember what it felt like to be helpless as a child, you will lose your compassion as an adult and you will treat kids the way adults treat you now. And I was terrified of becoming an adult who harmed children because I was around so many adults who harmed me. and then would try to convince me that they weren't harming me because the behavior that they were exhibiting was normalized. So because it was normalized to them, it's like, well, why would you be hurt? If it were hurt, then nobody would do it, but we all do it. So clearly it doesn't hurt you. And I'm in my own body as a child, knowing that I'm in pain, knowing that psychically I'm in pain. My heart is in pain. At times, my body is in pain. And it terrifies me because I know that I'm not going to forget. And it seems like the adults around me think something happens when I turn 18. Somebody flips a switch and I forget about everything bad that ever happened to me before. And that I wanted to honor the child version of me who knew she was a human the whole time, even when she was being treated inhumanely. I really wanted her perspective to be clear. I wanted to respect it as a human perspective because I wanted to remember I've been alive the whole time. I've been a person the whole time. And I think when you're a child, and really this is for anybody, even though we like to pretend it's different when you're an adult, but it's basically the same thing. The people who you think of as authority figures, also the people who you think of as your community, are the people who teach you what you're worth and teach you how you deserve to be treated. So if everybody treats you poorly, it's in your mind. You're not thinking like, I'm better than this, you know what I mean? Like, I deserve better. I'm stronger. I'm smarter, you know, or I'm worthy of a little more effort, a little more compassion on your part. Like, you know that, but you don't know that when you're a kid.
It becomes it threatens to become a fact.
It threatens to become a fact. So many of our beliefs are rooted in childhood norms. It's not like our beliefs aren't based on, you know, like not all of them, but quite a few of them. You hear somebody say something like, you know, like I have been a big proponent, you know, and I used to get a lot of pushback about this. I get a lot less now, which feels good, but I don't believe in hitting children. I just don't. And I don't because there is no other time in life where it's cool to hit somebody because they
or allowed, by the way,
allowed legally to hit somebody because
very inconsistent logic.
All this other stuff. Plus, any study that's not done by like Focus on the Family or the Heritage Foundation, any other study will tell you that hitting children creates more problems than the issues it fixes. And it is hitting children is often a sign that the adult is dysregulated and unregulated and unable to regulate themselves. You know, I think a lot about the fact that kids were not allowed to be angry in my mother's home. We weren't allowed to have anger. You know, like my mother considered it disrespectful for us to be angry about anything, at each other, at her, definitely at her, but at each other, at the world. Anger, sadness. She could not get, you know, pick it up.
Because there's, gosh, you know, there's an there is a type of parenthood that sometimes explicitly, sometimes implicitly frames my child is my property because I made this child. And I absolutely agree with you. I feel that, and I want to talk about children and the elderly because I feel though the pieces are so different. Young Ashley and Mr. Anthony actually, I think, have a lot in common, which makes sense because of children and the elderly as being so vulnerable in societies, right? But in a country where Black children were once property, I absolutely reject the idea that because a child is mine, that child is my property. I simply, just out of an acknowledgement of the history, but also logically, as you said, it doesn't work. But yeah, let's talk about, it's interesting because, you know, Mr. Anthony, Young, Ashley, first of all, would obviously get along very well.
I hung out with a lot of old people when I was a kid. It was like my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, and I should just say, so this was Christmas of 2023. I was there by myself for the holidays. So part of what's happening is, and you see later, is that I'm realizing how fucking lonely I am. And so this moment of connection like really lands. And then the other thing, because I tell students don't have a lot of dialogue in your nonfiction, it doesn't make sense. He drops me off and I sit down in the hotel lobby and immediately start writing because I was so moved, and then of course moved by this person I would certainly never see again. Well, I went back for Mardi Gras, as I said, and I did Mardi Gras. It was like the tail end, and was sick in bed the whole time. I had like a toothache that turned to me, but I was sick the entire rest of like 7 days. Finally start to feel better, get in a lift to go to the airport. I can barely sit up, and I just hear him, and it's again gigs, money, working. And the driver was just like, "How much are you paying?" Because I don't think, and I looked up and Mr. Anthony, is that you? And and I just couldn't, what are the odds? You know, I couldn't believe it. And he, being so grumpy, was like, he was a little confused as to why I was like having this response. And he was in a good mood, and we had it just, you know, it meant so much to me. So, I'm really struck by, like an old person, something that happens to him when he was young. He mentioned later, he was a teenager department store, like a really awful experience. But it's striking like anger, like these vulnerable people. He gets there, and I felt privileged that our interaction allowed him to get there. To like, that's why the moment locking eyes in the rear view mirror was really important. Like he made a decision. And it seems like with you make a decision standing in front of her desk. You know, I feel like you don't dare that with your mother. No, like even subtextually, but certainly in the classroom. Yeah. So can you talk about that?
You know, when you were talking about the idea of kids being property, right, which is very much an idea that I think my mom adhered and continues to adhere to. Like my mom doesn't, and sometimes I say this out loud and people are like, "Oh, of course." I'm like, "Please listen to me. I promise you I know." My mom didn't really like me. She didn't really like me. And she doesn't really, you know, which is an odd experience for somebody who is typically so well liked, as you know.
True.
Hello. But she doesn't like me. And it's really interesting because one of the things she will do is none of you can say anything about me, right? Like I've only ever heard positive things about myself from my mom secondhand. Like somebody else being like, "Oh, this person tried to say this about you, and your mom said, you know, don't you ever talk about my daughter is this and this and this, you know, and stuff like that." But she would never say those things to me. She won't even tell me she misses me, you know? Like it's not a thing. Like she just can't, for some reason between me and her, she can't do it. She can't get to that place, right? And I think that there was something in me from a very young age, and I think there's probably something going on with Mr. Anthony too, where there is a recognition at some point that you are on your own. You're like even if you have community and family and people who love you and care for you and are there with you and all of those things, at the same time, like you have to have something in you that likes you anyway, and that loves you anyway, and that likes and loves you enough to go where love is. Yes. And not just stay where you are. Yeah. And I think from a very, very young age, I had this anger. I recognized that there was something I wasn't getting. I recognized that there was more I wanted to give that I didn't have any place to give it to. And I also, because my mom treated me like property at home, out in the world, I had no more tolerance for other people telling me what to do or being like on my back like that, unless I felt like they cared about me. Yeah. Cynthia can tell you this. We had an amazing band director, Mr. Caffey. And me and Mr. Caffey got into one fight every year. Every year of band, we got into one big fight. And it was usually because, and honestly, most of the time, I would say 90% of those fights were because I didn't like the way he spoke to someone else. Right.
Which makes sense.
And I could not handle it. Yeah. At home, I had to be quiet. Yeah. I had to be, in the dark. I had to be in a corner. I had to be around the corner. I had to be quiet, but in the same room and unnoticed. You know, I had to really confine myself and shut myself down. And I refused to do that in any other capacity.
Yeah.
I felt like I couldn't. Even when I wanted to, I knew it was better to be good, you know, to like not end up in school detention, to not get suspended, to not once again be in the principal's office. You know, I knew that it was better to just take it. But there was something in me that said, if you take it now, you'll never stop.
I mean,
and you'll forget.
Yeah. Oh God, so many things. You see why. You see why. I was like, the work speaks for itself. But no, it's true. I mean, part of it, I think it's I'm thinking about this with Imani Perry's new book, The Blacks and Blues. It's about self-regard. We call it confidence, and that's part, but it's also self-regard and how you honestly feel about yourself. And I think children are wise. And that's another thing, like I see between young people and the elderly. In both of these pieces, I feel like you see a child, you see an elderly person working their way through whatever their circumstance is to get to what they her, because it's like young people they're wise. They know what's going on. You know how you feel. I love you said, I was alive the whole time, but you don't have the language. You don't have the tools, and you don't have the power. Nope. Right. And now he's an elderly man. He doesn't have a lot of power. He can only say what he's saying to me because I'm a Black person and because I've established, I understand exactly what the fuck you're talking about, dude. Yep. And I ain't no snitch, so what's good? You know what I mean? Like, what's good, Mr. Anthony? But that's a risk. You know what I mean? He can lose his job, and people are, as you say, like, people can be really mean in terms of what you say, overpower. Yeah. And so it's interesting. We deny the wisdom. We ignore elderly people, right? We ignore children, right? Yeah. And I don't know, there's just something there, I guess, like Jason's piece for the People's Project is about healthcare, and how healthcare is, of course, not just about what's going on in a hospital room. It's about housing. It's about self-regard. It's about children feeling safe. Children having, all of it. It's about healthcare. It's about Mr. Anthony being able to sit on his fucking porch. I was just so, and mind you, my grandfather passed away in like 1992. He died at 60, very young. But that was the other thing. I was like, even if my grandfather was still alive, he would be oldish. Like there was just no reason for this man to need to do this job, except that we live in this country and the way this country, regards healthcare. You know what I mean? The violence of the incompetence. It's not an incompetent system. It's a hostile healthcare system.
I know. I honestly believe that so many of the issues that we're dealing with in terms of what I would call like personality-based ideology, these
What, like eugenics? Oh,
I mean,
it's a vibe.
Some of it
it's
is eugenics.
Apparently,
That's
all the fucking rage
true.
these days. My God.
I think so much of what we're dealing with really has to do with with the fact that, like, a lot of people just still feel like bad kids. Oh. Honestly, I think a lot of people still feel like bad kids. And I think they're still trying to prove something to somebody. Somebody said, and I can't remember who it was, it's not me, I promise, who said that tradition is mostly just peer pressure from dead people. Yep. And I think about that.
I hear that every once in a while, and I keep needing to look up, like, where the hell
I can't even remember where it came from.
It really unlocks, you're like, oh my God.
Exactly. And I hear that, and I can't help but think about how often when I watch the news or I watch, some clip of something that's happened and somebody's acting a certain way, I'm like, that's how children act when they're dysregulated and when they're unregulated.
Trump's relationship with his father is so clearly.
It was messed up.
It's clear as day.
His relationship with his kids is also messed up. But my point really is that, like, a lot of people, it is so common for your relationships and your mental health journey, the way you learn how to deal with things, to be screwed up by the fact that you were raised by dysregulated adults. Yep. Because it's not just that nobody told you how to do the right thing, right? Like, we can all go Google or read a book and figure something out and figure out we have other options or other ways of doing things, right? Like, obviously, but it's not just that. It's also the fact that the information was kept from you and the example.
Yeah.
And the example. So even if you get the information, I know there's a better way to do this. I know there's a better way to deal with this. You don't know what that looks like. You don't know where you start. You don't know where it ends. Like, for me, that's a big issue in how we discuss hard things, hard subjects, taboo subjects, terrible things that are going on in the world. And you realize that a person is having difficulty talking about it, not because they don't know the words, not because they don't know the processes or the concepts, but because they emotionally can't talk about it without screaming. They can't talk about it or going completely silent. That is a learned, practiced behavior.
You let me know when I need to start taking questions.
Yeah, so.
Okay. Okay. Oh, perfect. Okay. Keep these good vibes going, and here's some questions from y'all. I love it. I'm loving this. This is good. This is the America we deserve in this room. Loving that. Run by Black queer people. You're welcome. But I love okay. Here's something I've been wondering.
Yes.
Because men are not okay. It is not a renaissance for, and we were talking about this. I'm just like, girl, what is going on? We're all fucked up, but the stakes are very different when men are fucked up because how men tend to lash out, you know what I mean? Queer people, women statistically usually turn in, self-annihilate. Men want to take other people down with them. So to that point, we're in this cultural moment I've noticed, thinking of what you just, all of everything you just said, where you see like, and I know we have the language, but like people gaslighting or, all the terms are avoidant and all of this, where there's the mainstream public awareness of mental health is, in many ways, a dream come true. Like, wow, we're getting, depression, anxiety, like people are internalizing these terms and identifying, and that is great. Yeah. That has taken a long time. However, I feel like I'm noticing a phenomenon in which, not always, but often I see people saying, well, I have anxiety, so. Yeah. Or I had this experience as a kid, so. You know what I mean? That's where it becomes I don't even know what it is, but you're like, and that's just the end? Like none of us are responsible for how we treat each other. Like it's just fully
This is one of those things where I really talk about personality predating like the language use, right? Because people who do things like that, if they didn't have the word anxiety, would have found a different word. If they had not gone to or listened to somebody who had gone to therapy or watched some YouTube videos or something like that, they just would have found a different mode. This is just the one that they found that they've decided to express right now. Like a narcissist is a narcissist is a narcissist. A misogynist is a misogynist is a misogynist. A bigot is a bigot is a bigot. And they will use whatever language and whatever tools they think further that agenda or that belief. So I think, honestly, in my estimation, what has happened is that now that these mental health conversations have become more common, there are a lot of people, as many people as like, it has helped to have words and to be able to identify these things, to be able to name them, know that they're real, know that it's not just something that you're making up inside yourself. As many people have that, there are just as many people who are deeply annoyed by the fact that they now have to learn those words or know what they mean or feel like they know what they're supposed to do when somebody uses that word. You know what I mean? And I think that discomfort gets turned up to harm. And it becomes a thing where a person who is originally really uncomfortable with a word is now sort of like against therapy. Do you know what I mean?
I-
It's like initially I was
Yeah.
upset about this, and I'm not talking about it, but initially I was upset because this person kept using this term and I didn't get it. But now it's turned into actually, I think therapy's the enemy.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
No,
and
that's absolutely.
and I think I honestly think that happens because people are so,
Shout out to free speech in college campuses.
you know what I'm saying? People are so not used to some people are so not used to being uncomfortable with something that is mainstream. Usually, whenever something's mainstream, it's very comfortable for them. So
Palatable.
now something is both mainstream and uncomfortable. And to them, in order to justify the annoyance they feel, in order to hold on to it, they can't just be annoyed. It has to be a problem. Yep. Right? It has to be an issue. So let me go find the way that it's an issue.
Ooh.
And I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of bad boyfriends out here being like, well, I don't want you to wear that outfit. That's my boundary. You know what I mean? Or
Which is literally a thing. Who
or
was the
some lady
celebrity,
out here, Jonah Hill.
Thank you.
Or some lady out here, being like, you're
was dating a surfer,
you're
by the way.
gaslighting me when you won't give me what I asked for.
Yeah.
Like
No,
there
I
are
love
people who
this.
are going to misuse these words and use them for evil.
I love that.
stuff.
So first of all, I have to recommend everything Sarah Schulman does. Just an incredible mentor and activist of mine. Yeah. Her book, Conflict is Not Abuse. The title alone is profound. Conflict is not abuse. Something else you said, like discomfort. I had transparently an argument. Well, someone did something and it led to an argument. It wasn't you. I'll tell you later. And we were texting, and first of all, and it's they shared some information via text, and it was like the worst possible time. And I was like, I can't fucking deal with this right now. It was like, why are we even fucking? You know what I mean? I was so upset. It was like that moment, your day has been derailed. You're like, well, let me just scratch out all those to-do items. That shit ain't happening today. Now we've gone left, and so I was pissed. And this person said, listen, I'm not trying to start a fight. And I said, but this is a fight. That's what I replied. Went on. And it was just so interesting. Full 24 hours. I was like, let me call. We've got to talk. We've got to get on the phone. I was like, the timing was wrong. But also, this was not and is not a texting conversation. And sometimes, because I live with my phone in my hand, I have run into a disagreement, and I'm like, it's literally the wrong medium, Saeed. You should have called that person. You should have, just wait. Anyway, so we get on the phone. We talk for 45 minutes. And what was so striking during this conversation with a friend was that what he kept returning to, and I'm going to take his words in good faith. Y'all see me straining, was me saying, but this is a fight. He felt was disrespectful. And it just like really, and there's always other things going on, but it was really, because I was like, well, I felt it was important if we're actually having a disagreement and we're texting. I don't want you to think I'm being sarcastic or haha, whatever. I think we need to acknowledge, I'm actually really upset. And maybe fight wasn't the best word, but it's not a slur. You're not in danger. And so it's, as a poet, as writers, I mean, it's alarming. First of all, people aren't reading. The girls aren't reading. And I mean, they're not reading anything. You watch a music video and you're like, what's that music video about? And I'm shook. I'm actually shook. Because if we cannot agree on basic terms, what's the difference between I didn't like my boss was a jerk, that boss is abusive, look out. Those are three very different statements. And I think we need to have some agreement on things. Conflict, abuse, yeah.
I agree. And I also think that unfortunately, this has been a long-standing issue. I think a lot of words that we use and think of as common words are not commonly defined. I think that we need to ask people more questions about what they mean when they use a word that everybody thinks is commonly defined.
I mean, even earlier today, talking about the federal employees, which, my God. By the way, part of what they're doing so many things, but they're trying to destroy the Black middle class. The federal government jobs created a Black middle class in the United States. And that's very much part of what they're doing. They're not just coming for us, they're coming from everyone, but understand that that is really the project. But, you know, talking about it today, and like, I got so mad I like lost my temper for a moment. Oh, what's the term? Thank you. Probationary doesn't mean what a lot of people thinks it means. Probationary could mean you are a relatively new federal employee. It could mean you've been working in the Social Security Administration for 20 years and decided to switch to a different department. And so you're you know what I mean? So even that, and you see, right? In news, it makes it, to me, it makes it, they're acting like a bunch of interns have been laid off. Not that interns deserve to be laid off either, but you know what I mean? Like, obviously, when you're like, oh, wait a minute, some of people with like a bunch of institutional knowledge, the person where you're like, where's Christina? Where's Christina? She's got the, you know what I mean? Like, if Christina decided to do her same role for different programs, she would be probationary. Oh my God, you know what I mean? And so that's just like one example where I'm just seeing in real time, you know, and obviously, again, give a fuck about probationary employees too, but the way news, you know, and then the way we talk, I don't know, it's just really scary. I feel like your piece, or excuse me, the excerpt you read, I mean, first of all, it's a horror story. Like it's a horror, I mean, literally like people were like fully holding their breaths.
Horror stories only work because they're common. Horror, it's true.
Woo! Yeah.
I mean, it's we're looking
You're
at
right.
the story through a unique
Yes.
circumstance, but you have to be able to believe that these things will happen. You have to know that they. Do you know what that movie was? Birth of a Nation. And we now think of Birth of a Nation as like some weird old racist movie or whatever, but at the time it was a horror film.
Yeah.
It was a
They're
horror
coming to get
film.
you.
They're coming to get you.
Yeah, hello.
It's still a horror film.
Yeah, but we're like, who's scared? Who's the protagonist now?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And yeah, because by the way, also the only thing I ever would get in trouble for as a kid, well, once I cut my hair with scissors, and my mom was very pissed in kindergarten. I was like, honestly, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But was lying. Was lying. It was the only thing that I would get a spanking for was lying. And so to me, the idea of a misunderstanding, whatever, you know, whatever, I mean, it's crazy, like what you learn. I mean, it only gets more devastating. I'm so mad at that little fucking girl. Just like, not her fault, it's okay. She's a kid. She didn't know. Teacher should have known. Yeah, well, okay, T. But like telling the truth, like a simple truth. You know, my name is Saeed. My gender is this. This is how you know what I mean? Like, you're right. It is like people accusing you of lying and in fact, inflicting harm upon you. And then what's the only thing worse when you're a kid? Like kids, their sense of justice, again, wise. And you're so, I mean, when you're a kid and you like truly know what's going on and you feel that now justice surely is we're going to balance the scales, it is earth and soul shattering to see adults. And so your mom just like, why are you so, I mean, my God, after so many kind of
it's a devastating
beats.
I don't think people really take seriously what it does to a child. Like I said, like earlier, it's not just the helplessness of like other people being in control and having no power.
Right.
It's also that like you often have to look at somebody who has power over you and you don't trust them. That's terrifying to know that this person, every decision that they make about you is going to determine so many factors for the rest of your life. And you can't do anything about it. And you might realize that at 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. And then you have to spend the next 9 years knowing every day, every single day, living inside that powerlessness. No wonder so many people just want to forget childhood. And so no wonder so many people join the other side against their child self.
Yeah.
So many people look back at their child self with hate,
disdain,
with, you know, I've heard so many people say stuff like, well, I deserved it. I was a really bad kid.
Yeah.
And it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Also, mind you, I taught high school briefly. I taught ninth and 12th. And it was a short time period, but it still informs so much of. And it was really interesting because I learned that I really could not make assumptions. I came up with basically the quadrant. There were students who would just, be a problem. I love you, but you're a problem, baby. You pissing me off. I actually need to talk to your parents. And I would wait, because I was like, I don't want to talk to your parents. And I also, who knows what this conversation said. And I can't tell you the number of times, like the problem students' parents come in. And we'd be having the conversation sitting at the table, Ashley, and I can't tell you the number of times I started fully disassociating. And I would be like, you can't take this child home, Saeed. You can't take this child home. Like I would suddenly be like, honestly, I'm amazed this kid is able to do anything because what the fuck is going on with you? Other times it'd be a great kid, terrible, and so that now when they're school shooters and stuff and people are like, well, look at them. I'm like, honestly, I don't know what's going on here, but I know that the children are the most vulnerable part of this, and we owe them so much. And also it makes me think of Matthew Desmond. He talks about poverty, a cascade effect, because obviously what Ashley is a miracle. We are so fortunate that Ashley found her way and Ashley understood that she was alive the whole time. But there's also a scenario in which based on that experience with that teacher, Ashley doesn't talk in class anymore. Ashley stopped doing her homework. And now they actually do have things to pin on you. And now you are in detention. Now you are suspended. Now you are kicked out of school. It can cascade. I mean, that's literally basically essentially Nickel Boys, one little child decision changes the course of his life. And so I don't know. I'm gonna stop talking and take some questions from y'all because I'm fucking pissed. And I guess that's the other thing. I get angry about myself, but I experience rage on behalf of other people. And I've been thinking about that with the People's Project, that I just want to say, tap into your rage. For me, rage is when I say, get behind me. That's why, and there's community. They want us angry and alone. They want us angry and alone. They want us to feel like Ashley in that kitchen, I can't, caught between the teacher and that mother, figure. But we're not alone, and I think, and there's actually community and rage. And so I do get fucking pissed, but I think it's important to kind of talk about this together. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
You know what, I'm sorry, can I just?
Oh yeah, here, boom. We can share. We can share. Hi, Zoom.
Hey, Zoom. My name is Noor. Thank you both so much for this beautiful event. We've just been passing class notes in the form of text, talking about how obsessed we are with everything you're saying. We're taking notes.
Love it.
I think I just had one quick comment and one question for you, Ashley. One thing that really struck me in your story, when I think about how the sort of the repercussions of this little girl and how of this girl who sort of misled the teacher, and how she's in this room today and you've kind of carried her with you through your life. It kind of just reminds me of the interdependence, the cruciality of interdependence, and how that is at the center of an ethic of care, and how this young child has had this kind of lifelong impact. I guess the question really that I have for you is, what's it like for the girl that lives inside of you when you write these stories and you share these stories? Is it reparative? Is it cathartic? What's that process like?
I think, while writing, it's all just torture, right? While I'm typing, it's all just until I hit a flow moment, which might sustain me through the next part, hopefully.
When you say torture, do you mean the torture of writing, or emotion, it's an emotional?
I actually mean the torture of writing, because I am the kind of person who I edit too much while I'm writing. And I need to let myself just write and then come back and edit. And my brain does not want to do that. My brain is I don't like that sentence. Do it again. Right. And
her editor, it's true.
It's true. It really messes with me.
Watching over her shoulder because you were.
And it's
yeah.
Here we go. Delete. delete, like over and over. And it takes me a minute to get over that. So it's really, that's rough for me. I have discovered through writing this book and other things that I've written that nothing about writing for me is therapeutic, but my writing does introduce me to what I need to go to therapy about.
That's I love that.
That's usually what happens for me. I'm not really one to be like, as I'm writing something, to start crying and to start feeling it. I am much more likely to find myself at a point where I can't write something. And then I'm like, why can't I write? What's happening? Why can't I write that down? What's the problem here? And I write around it, or I try to write above it or under it or something. And at every point, it's blocking me. And when that happens, I'm like, I can't write about it yet. I haven't dealt with it. I have not processed that. And I got to go talk to that lady about this. I got to go talk to somebody else because it's there, you know? But I can tell you that, nobody has put in more effort on behalf of my child self than me, right? Like, it's a sadness, but it is also a beautiful thing that I get to be my own hero. You know, like the person who went back and got her and listened to her and brought her to the forefront and did not give her a voice, let her speak with her own voice. That was me.
Saved your own life.
You know, and that is a joy and a pride, yeah, that I get to have for the rest of my life. I get to hold on to for the rest of my life. Realizing that every version of me is still inside me and none of us are alone because we have each other. It's really helped me out. Wow. Sorry, y'all. It's, you know, my cycle coming.
What's crazy, and Ashley knows Isaac Fitzgerald, the writer that's coming next month. If you can believe it, Isaac and I are going to cry so much more than we've cried during this. Like, if you do not understand what's coming your way, but yeah, that is incredible. Yeah, it's incredible.
They are lovers.
Yeah.
Really switching gears.
Oh, yeah.
Someone asked, Saeed, would you say more about why dialogue doesn't make sense in nonfiction?
Oh, I was like, please don't ask me to talk about Luigi. It was just, I mean, I would, but you know, the praxis. So, you're the best. You're so sweet, Anna. Because the challenge of creative nonfiction is that you are using creative and fictive elements and techniques to try to depict reality, to try to tell the truth and try to do it in a truthful way. Now, it's in a book. It's called creative nonfiction. It's a memoir. It's not a history, right? And so there is a certain willful suspension of disbelief. And certainly when you're reading work by an incredibly talented writer like Ashley C. Ford, for example, you know, a few sentences in, you're like, well, I'll go wherever this lady takes me. You know, like you're built. She's earning your trust again and again, and soon you kind of forget. You're just in the world very quickly, right? That being said, I feel in nonfiction, dialogue has its limits because, and that's why I said, I was like, it's really important for you to know that I like ran to the lobby of that hotel and like sat down and the first, everything I was writing is, what did he say? What did he say? What did he say? I was like, I'll get to my thoughts later. Because, you know, Ashley in that scene, for example, the last scene with her mother in the book, Somebody's Daughter, which everyone should buy 2 copies of, as I always say, one for you and one for a friend. You're not going to want to read it alone. It's because that dialogue works because we get the dialogue, the most important thing. We get the sentence, and there are sentences that have been spoken to us or words seared into our memory. We will be dead and gone, and that sentence will still kind of be a part of our soul, and that's important. Like that little girl being like, well, it sounded like, you know, there are some things you just like can't let go of. Now, if I ask you, write down the transcript of an hour-long conversation, you know, no, or even a 3-minute conversation you had yesterday, right? So that's why I'm like, keep it tight. And if you study like how Ashley writes those scenes, you will note how she uses paraphrase or wondering or what the mom usually says, and then leads us to the dialogue that's important. That's why. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to forget you, boo.
Sorry, I'm a little bit of an intruder from FAS. Thank you. First of all, both of you are extremely brilliant, and I admire you both very deeply. So thank you so much for sharing your stories. I'm very, very proud of both of you guys. Question for you. We're gonna zoom out just a little bit back to the money thing that I know y'all alluded to earlier. I wanted to know a little bit more about your experience as Black authors in a very, very white publishing industry. Both of the stories that you all share are unapologetically Black and unapologetically your experience. But I'm curious about whether or not your editors, pretty much every node in the publishing process, if they valued those stories and how you sort of fought to tell those stories on paper. I'm going through this right now.
I know. I like to just tell people I had a unicorn experience. I don't know how else to describe it. I had a unicorn experience. I really did. Like, as far as how well the book did, how well received it was, not just commercially, but also in, spaces of intense and rigorous literature, which is not what this, it's a fantastic, to me, it is a fantastic book. It is the best I could do at the time that I did it, and I love it. It's a baby of mine. But I did not expect for people who had written books that I think of as now new classics, foundational texts, to be telling me how much they enjoyed my book. That was wild. And when it comes to the compensation factor, I remember do you remember that day online when everybody was sort of starting to sharing on Twitter, sharing their book advances and stuff like that? My response to that was to say, if you want to know from me specifically, just DM me and ask me, because I did not want to put the number out there. I felt like it would skew the conversation that was happening, because I was a unicorn situation. I was watching people saying, I only got this much for my book. I only got this much. I only got this much, which I didn't know. And I'm watching and I'm like, oh, what happened? Because that wasn't my experience. I got a lot of money for my book. I got a lot of money for my second book. You know what I mean? And I did. And it really works out for me. Like it has been what it's allowed me to have the life I have right now, which is not like some highfalutin, high rolling life, you know what I mean? But it is definitely a life that is extremely privileged in what I get to decide to do every day, what I get to participate in and how I get to do that. And I was really clear with people, and I gave specifics and specific numbers. I let them know how my contract worked, all of those things. And then they would say, well, if you got that, you must have lost rights to this, this, and this. And I'm like, no, I didn't. Now I have all those rights still. Like, they're still mine. And that and that was rough, Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is such an important question, and I'll be very direct. I've had a good experience, but let's set that aside for a second. So one, you have to understand, you can read my essay. I wrote it in 2013, 2014, self-portrait of the artist as an ungrateful Black writer. When I published that, publishing was 89% white. It's mostly made up by white women. Interestingly, white women usually are not the top publisher. So it's mostly privileged white women, because how can you afford to work in an industry where the average salary is $40,000? You have to be wealthy. But still, those women don't get to actually be the CEOs or publishers. So that is intersectional. Also not queer. I always thought, yeah, publishing is really straight and really homophobic too, which always kind of surprises me. But I say all that to say some things to think about is, so when two dynamics. When you get a book advance, you get this big, it's great and it's very exciting. One thing that I love that she's acknowledging in being a unicorn is that the unicorns, a trans writer gets a great book deal, or this Black woman got a great book deal. Often publishing uses it to say, see, everything's great. And it ain't. So that's one thing that's going on. It's really everyone wants Ashley to get million book advances. Fuck you. She deserves it. You know what I mean? Everyone, you know, like that's just how I feel. And that's fine. And that's not about me. I don't need that. I don't want it. You know, yeah, I'm happy with my cool like $350,000 book advance. Yes, it was a flex. Okay. But the reason I'm drawing attention to this is something, an example of like how messed up this industry is. Like, so you get your book advance, you need to earn out, which means you need to sell enough copies of that book to match the advance, to match the marketing. They sent you on a big book tour. Okay, most books don't earn out. How We Fight for Our Lives did very well. It has not earned out yet. It will, right? But it hasn't earned out yet. Here's why it's important. If you do not earn out, it's not impossible, but the odds of you getting that huge advance again, I'm really honored. And I think it says something about my work and my reputation and all that, that like, How We Fight for Our Lives, $350,000 advance. I got the same for Home Out There. You know what I mean? And I did not assume that was going to happen. You know, they could have been like, sorry, you're only going to get what you got. You know, the reason I'm saying this is that in 2020, the publishing industry, as so many institutions, briefly decided to give a fuck about Black people, and so they did their little slave initiatives. Oh, what happened? Laid them off. They created all of these, like, you know, resuscitated imprints, photos focused on Black writers. All those editors and all those imprints have now been laid off and shut down. But those Black writers, during that brief window when they decided to give a fuck about Black people, because we said, please stop killing us, all kinds of Black writers got huge book advances. White guilt turned into paychecks. And I love that for those writers. However, okay, but so many of those people, like the editor who bought the book, laid off. The publisher laid off. The people who believed in your book, oh, they're like 3 publishers away now because it's just like revolving doors. And there was no, it's 2020. Y'all remember? Yeah, so all of these writers, you're on the hook. No one goes, oh yeah, things were kind of good. They go, well, you didn't earn out. You got $1 million book advance and you only sold $75,000 worth of copies. So yikes, you know, like this predicament. And so I just think it shows how Black people, women, queer people, like you see the winds change direction and all that, but we get caught up, you know, in those systems. And what's crazy is that there's no, we're working on like, there's no public discourse about advances and stuff. So people don't know, you know, and they think, I've talked to so many writers who think it's their fault. They think they messed up because they're isolated. I'm like, honey, it was a systemic, it was a trap, honestly. It's timing.
It's timing. There's so many things that come into it that just, they're just not in your control. They're just not. And I think sometimes publishers, editors, agents, or whatever don't want you to think it's their fault. So they try to tell you, well, you didn't do this or you didn't. But the truth of the matter is none of those things really matter.
You have a question?
One more.
So yeah, the answer is not great, Bob. Not great.
I have a comment and it's not a question. Is that okay?
How dare you?
Okay. So this is Ashley's book, by the way.
Yes.
You guys should really, really buy it.
Yes.
And like, since there are people on Zoom, then they can, you know, look up your book and look at reviews and stuff. Would it be terribly embarrassing for me to read my review of your book?
Go ahead.
She's heard it already. When you read Ashley Ford's memoir, Somebody's Daughter, you may think of how her voice resonates and comforts at the same time. It's confident, it's calm, and then it cracks, and then it laughs, and then it holds you. Ashley's is a journey of self-discovery, self-actualization, self-love. She opens up her awe, her trauma, her gratitude, and her trepidation. When she talks about her doubts, she reaches out to grab your hand, reminding you that you'll be safe. And when you see pictures of Ashley, the author today, you'll see a woman. You see a successful, strong, complete woman who has found her path, her style, and her voice. And we can remind ourselves that she has made it out on the other side of this, which has allowed for us the privilege of hearing her story. But when I see it, when I read it, I see her beautiful, beaming smile. I see her bouncing ponytail. I see her skinny, girlish frame standing and chatting with our friends at rehearsal on the Paul Harding High School stage. Ashley and I went to the same high school. I'm older by 4 years. So when I think of Ashley, yes, she is a woman, but she is also that 14-year-old. She's a best-selling author, but she's also Lucy in You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown. Intentionally off key, by the way, to hilarious effect. She's an interviewer, host, writer, and teacher, but she's also one of us band geeks. You hear this voice of reason and expertise and fortitude, and you're absolutely correct. And I see that girl, that warm, young, encouraging twinkle in her eye, radiant girl, that girl with the easiest laugh, that girl with the shake your head jokes, that girl who so freely gave unexpected compliments, that child. There were people who forced that child to become an adult far earlier than her choosing. That beautiful and yes, innocent child. This is a book about that cultish kid. And this is a book about this brilliant woman. After reading an exceptional book, I sometimes get this sensation in my chest. It's hollow, but it's full. It's yearning, but it's satiated. It's sad, but it's joyful. That is the feeling I have now. I am so deeply proud of her. Best for ages 15 and up. Readers who appreciated Maya Angelou's I Know How the Caged Bird Sings should pick up this book. And I just on a separate note, you mentioned how they want us to be alone. And of course, you've been talking a lot about health and mental health. I mean, I don't know if I've ever told you this, Ashley, but about 8 or 9 years ago on social media, you wrote a post about things that you don't know are anxiety. And it included irritability and like temper tantrums. Yeah. And I saw that and I had no idea that that's what I had until that moment. I had been repeatedly diagnosed with depression and non-specified mood disorder at that point. And then I saw that. And I got trauma counseling for the first time. And I've been in trauma counseling since 2019. I've since been diagnosed with 2 anxiety disorders. That was life-changing for me, Ashley. And these have been the best years of my life since then. I thank you so much. I love you. Thank you.
I couldn't think of a better way to wrap this up. I mean, yeah, we're not alone. They want us to feel that way. They want us to be, shut down and stunned into silence. But clearly, doing this work and sharing how the work, connects. That's why I say buy 2 copies, because it's no longer a great book you read on your own. It's now a connection you have with someone else. I really think that it's more powerful. We give it credit for.
Also, I turned out okay. I just wanted to let you know.
She's a hoot.
Turned out okay.
She's a total fucking hoot.
My husband's a bookseller. When he sells the book to people, he always say, "Hey, just so you know, she turns out okay." She's all right.
And we leave it there. Thank y'all for joining us. Thank you for joining us on Zoom.
Thanks for coming,
Jason,
guys.
Allison.